Okay, welcome back, members and invitees, to this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee 1 to discuss the annual budget and mid-term financial strategy. We're now going to turn to budget reductions in the Education and Family Support Directorate, and that is starting on page 53 of our public document packs. First of all, we'll discuss EDFS1, and that's the reduction in staff mileage budgets. And the first question is from Councillor Amanda Williams.
Apologies, Chair. I was just trying to find my position. Right, yeah, EDFS1, reduction in staff mileage budgets. So that's a positive in that we can potentially make reductions. But I wondered if further along we're discussing in this report, and it has been suggested that we may need to merge schools. Won't that simply increase again if teachers are being told they need to then travel between schools to provide teaching? Also, I believe we've got some ideas, or there have been some suggestions of head teachers overseeing 2 schools. So if that's the case again, they're going to be travelling between 2 schools. So how are we going to ensure that we achieve that? Because there will be unknown at the moment potential increases to the budget. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Williams. Would that be from schools' delegated budgets themselves then, Lindsay, or because this is Central Education and Family Support Directorate? So I assume this particular budget line is referring to staff and officers here rather than head teachers, but perhaps you can answer Councillor Williams' question in more detail.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, the EDFS1 refers to officers. What we've done is obviously over the pandemic, we've looked at different ways of doing things, different ways of conducting meetings, for example, virtually. And this has had an effect, and we'll continue that. It is a challenge because obviously sometimes it is a requirement to be in-person meetings, or especially around assessments. With regard to other areas, this would be schools' delegated budgets. What we do, we always support when we've got schools who are head teachers are operating executive head teacher capacity. We support them, but the general cost of that is very low, Chair.
Thanks very much. Councillor Williams, content?
Yes, that I've got it under the wrong heading, but that does then bring some concerns that if schools' budgets are going to have to cover, if you've got a head teacher who's covering 2 schools, and I believe we'll get potentially 2 pay points, which is up to £4,000 less 40% tax, and then you've got a hit then for doing something over and above. Your school's then going to be hit with all your mileage costs back and forth between the 2 schools when we're already saying we're cutting budgets. So that has brought a whole different concern out of that.
Yeah, sure, fully understand. Lindsay, do you have anything else to add?
Not really, Chair. I accept what Councillor Williams is saying. It's not been raised as an issue previously with head teachers who've been involved in executive head positions, but I'd be more than happy to pick it up with them. We've got a number of executive heads running. I certainly will be in the next month or so. I'll pick it up with them and I'll be happy to feed that back.
Thanks, Lindsay. Just one from me is that how did you arrive at that figure? 13% and £18,000 budget reduction. Is there any room to be even more ambitious than that from central functions? Because while I know that it's necessary to have face-to-face meetings in some respects, because it's important to keep up that kind of engagement like we are today, is there any more scope for more ambitious cuts in this particular area?
Thanks, Chair. I think it's fair to say it's constant and under review. I suppose the challenge we have with it, we can't minimise it altogether because some of the attendance of meetings, especially with an in-person around pupil assessments, for example, we'd have to be in person for them. So, we constantly review it.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. We're now going to EDFS 2, and that is the Directorate Vacancy Management Factor, and we've got Councillor Williams and Councillor Spiller on this one. Oh, sorry, I got you down, Councillor Spiller, on this one. Apologies. Councillor Williams, I think?
Yes, but this is where I said I've got questions on because it relates to redundancies throughout and recruitment and everything. So I can tie it all in to one question because there's a number of headings that this covers.
Yeah, that would be helpful. We note in the whole of the budget reduction proposals Lindsay and colleagues, that staffing makes up quite a number of them. And of course, we want some clarity, don't we, over the risk and the extent of the staffing cuts. For example, budget reduction 9 and 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 20, 24, 25, 26, 27, 30 and 31 refer to staffing. So perhaps you can tie it all in, Councillor Williams, and raise your points regarding that.
Sorry, I'll come in first then. Yeah, so mine were a number, and we did discuss some in COSC yesterday as well. So we discussed HR there, which is a corporate service, and I think Deborah touched on this earlier as well, about some of these core services that come in under other headings but do impact on education. So for example, HR, I was wondering what impact it would have on schools, and will a reduction in HR mean the schools need to take this function in-house, and how can they fund this if there's budget cuts? We're looking at procurement, that was discussed yesterday, and I picked something up from the Cabinet meeting that was on Tuesday with regards to procurement, and it was something that the legal officer advised, that it was her understanding that all purchase card holders get quarterly reports to monitor the spend, but schools don't get this report. So does that mean they're now responsible for managing it all themselves? What financial controls will therefore be on schools, particularly as COSC heard that there are going to be these cuts to procurement? And have we got assurance that whilst we're ensuring financial safeguards, the tasks are not too onerous for schools? They don't have to fill in sheets and sheets of paperwork then to buy £20 worth of something from Amazon for the school. So that was a cut from procurement. We've got the cuts from HR. I leave you bring in the health and safety, because I know you had a question on health and safety. Yeah. And so if I leave that there, because I know Councillor Spiller has some questions too.
Yeah, so it's essentially the reduction in central functions which may have an adverse impact on schools. So, Councillor Spiller, would you like to add anything to that before I bring in colleagues?
Yeah, I'll pick up my health and safety bit here rather than later down the line, because it may as well get picked up in this point. And that is, why is the health and safety team falling under education when in every other organisation this is a central corporate body? So EDFS 25, will a cut to education result in less support for schools?
Okay, thank you both. Let's take those then first, Lindsay, if you don't mind.
Thanks, Chair. I'll try to cover them all. If I miss any, please let me know. Obviously, schools are aware of the financial processes that are established within the financial scheme for schools, and as part of Debbie's team, there's significant support with primary settings, as Jonathan will no doubt agree with regard to the support they receive. And similarly with secondary schools, obviously it's a different system in secondary schools, but there is an ability for secondary schools to buy into the services that we provide as well if they want to. One of the key elements that we've seen over the last 3 years is a requirement and agreement with trade unions to reduce paperwork in schools, and we've worked hard with that. And as my understanding is, the trade unions have agreed now the processes that we've put in place are they're content with those. With regard to HR losses or HR changing processes, inevitably that will impact upon schools. I think what we have seen is when you have less HR specialists involved, it will slow down the recruitment process, and that's inevitable. We have seen that, and other local authorities have experienced that as well. We have tried hard to support schools with this and doing things differently. Going back to Councillor Jones's earlier point about transformation, for example, 5 years ago we established an external legal services service level agreement where schools buy in at quite an effective cost, really, and that's been in existence for 5 years, and that certainly helps schools through economies of scale. The last point with regard to the corporate health and safety unit, when I first was in post, the built environment was part of my directorate, and part of the built environment was the corporate health and safety unit. that still remains with me. Councillor Spiller is right, it's different in other local authorities. Some local authorities, corporate health and safety units sit within HR, some within finance, some more in corporate functions. We see that in different ways. One thing I will say, and hopefully schools will concur with me on this one, is certainly during the pandemic, it was a real plus point having health and safety in schools, because obviously we were very flexible and agile in supporting some of the key challenges in that setting. To answer the question with regard to the reduction, up until 2 years ago, we were significantly understaffed in this. We went out to adverts several, trying to fill it the post. This year, we are fully staffed now, and the proposal is around vacancy management, about not replacing a post when that colleague leaves us at the end of the year.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Councillor Williams, Councillor Spiller, anything further from you?
Yes, please. I just had one other question on this. It's difficult for us to see when you're proposing to cut positions in the directorate as well. So I would have liked to have seen a staff structure so that we can understand how many you've got in your team and the impact it will have on individual teams. And I think that goes across every directorate, and it would be good because we're looking at everyone having these cuts, and I think staffing structures will make it plainer to all of us what's involved and how many staff in real terms. Thanks.
Thanks. I assume that's a relatively easy thing to provide. I'm sure Kelly Watson, the head of HR, will be able to provide that, I assume, Lindsay, or you'll be able to do that for your own directorate? Or
I would certainly take Kelly's advice on it. I don't see a problem. Obviously, we wouldn't be naming people, it'd just be posts. So from a GDPR point of view, I have no issue, but I need to check with HR.
Okay. Perhaps we can make a note of that, and we'll circulate that if possible. I'm sure it won't be a problem, Councillor Williams. Sorry, Leader.
Yeah, just to say that we would need to be careful about the process and the timelines around that, because sometimes by producing staffing structures, we identify individual posts where we have only single posts. You are therefore identifying individuals. So one of the reasons why some of that detail hasn't been provided in this draft document is obviously the draft document is very large already, but we have to be careful because this is a draft plan, not a final plan, and we have to go through a legal process with consultation with staff and make sure that those staff are aware that they are potentially at risk due to the proposals. It is possible some of the larger budget reductions in larger service areas to provide additional information, because it's not so easy to identify those individuals, but it is more difficult in some service areas. But certainly there is a point in the process where that can be shared, and I think that would be helpful to members, but it's getting that timeline right so that it protects the integrity of the process. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks. Notwithstanding that, I'm sure you'll provide what you can provide for Councillor Williams to give her clarity. Councillor Spiller, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, given that every other directorate have provided staff reduction proposals, can I ask what consideration is being made to reduction in core education staff?
Lindsay, I'm struggling to know exactly what you mean. Councillor Spiller, perhaps you can clarify? Or the 3% vacancy, do you mean, for central?
I think it's really to query, Chair, whether there are any proposed cuts to core educational staff.
Okay, yeah, Lindsay can take that.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, and again, not happy to confirm, but I can confirm that is the case. On EDFS 2, predominantly what we're looking at there is vacancy management. So we would not fill posts unless it's absolutely essential. As the Chief Exec has previously said, we've had a very clear directive to look at all posts, whether they're co-funded or grant-funded, and only fill them if absolutely necessary. So this would relate very much to posts that are vacant.
Thank you very much. Content to that answer, Councillor Spiller? Yeah. Okay, now move on to EDFS 3, the cessation of the Meals at Home service, and back to you, Councillor Spiller.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just wanted to seek some clarity on this proposal, really, just so I could fully understand the impact of it. Obviously, I understand that the proposal's not fully developed, and obviously being coded in red, there's a high risk of it not being delivered. But obviously, when reading something like this, and when we're talking about protecting people that are disadvantaged or obviously vulnerable, this stood out to me as something that needed real clarity on.
Thank you very much. Lindsay?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Spiller. Again, going back to Councillor Spiller's previous point, this is an interesting one because obviously this social services function is delivered from within my directorate. There's a clear reason for doing that. Obviously, the catering service resides within education and family support, and it's been something we've been doing successfully for a number of years. What we have seen over the last 2 years, it's fair to say, has been extreme pressures on the service. The availability of staff has been difficult. Obviously, the cost inflation with regard to meals, and we've tried really hard to keep the cost to the client, as low as possible. So it is a particular challenge, and one of the things that we are doing at the moment, hence the reason it's moved into the following financial year, is we're looking very closely with social services and wellbeing colleagues to see how this can be mitigated, and that could be mitigated in a number of ways. Looking to run separate facilities through partners, and again, this is something we're going to take the next couple of months now to work out. Currently, though, however, where we are with this service, it's not sustainable. So regardless of whether this would appear as a budget reduction proposal or not, this would be something that would be very difficult to sustain in the longer term.
Okay, Councillor Spiller, you content?
Yes, I guess so, Chair. I mean, my kind of inquisitive mind says, seeing as this is a social services function that is delivered from the educational budget, what is there a corresponding budget line that takes it from social services into education, so that the funding comes through from the social services budget into education to fund it?
Thanks, Councillor Spiller. Lindsay?
Thanks, Chair. Thank you. No, it's fully subsumed within our budget.
Thank you very much. The Deputy Leader has indicated, and then Councillor Bland.
Thank you very much, Chair. I actually agree with this budget proposal. I do think we can deliver it cheaper for our residents out there, should we look at alternative provisions. We are, all throughout the budget, all you'll see is about pay and prices, and we need full cost recovery for anything that we deliver. Our residents actually pay for this service themselves. I don't think it's good value for money for them. And I would suggest that there are alternatives that are much more economical for them. We just need to organise how we're going to get that information to people so that they can make a choice that's suitable to them. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Blundell?
Yeah, my points were really just, I was going to come in and say, as Lindsay has outlined, the service has struggled to the extent that, for those who were in the last scrutiny meeting that met Louise Curtin, she took a break from delivering the meals to come to that meeting. So she, as the catering manager, she's been helping out on the front lines of this, showing how this service is about to fall over and would pretty much need significant investment to do it, and we're definitely not in a position to do that. But as the Deputy Leader outlined, we're now about going out to these people who use this service and say, well, actually, this service might be better for you and better economically in the long run, but it's about making the service better for the individual. So I hope that sort of answers Councillor Spiller's question there. I hope he's got a bit more clarity on that.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Spiller has indicated that he's content. So we'll move now to EDFS 4, and that is the reduction of nursery provision, and we'll go to Councillor Winstanley first.
Chair. Thank you, Chair. That's got that working. Yes, so I had a couple of concerns about this question. In particular, I wanted to check what the statutory minimum requirement for nursery provision is, and what does discontinuing full-time provision look like? Does that mean that no children will get nursery provision? Is there something else planned instead? Can we have assurances that that we're not reducing the amount of hours that children who are currently getting nursery provision are getting? Would that be affecting children who are getting current provision? I can see from the the report, that it all looks as if the funding ceases in a year's time rather than in the current financial year. I'd also like to sort of highlight that it looks at what's the impact of this going to be on Welsh language education in particular, because for those children who are coming from English medium schools, to miss out on the essential learning skills that while they're very, very young, they're picking up language like a sponge, and the sooner that can happen, the sooner they can become bilingual. So I'm concerned about that. But I'm also aware, and this is what head teachers have spoken to me about who at schools I'm the governor, that children are in some cases being 18 months behind their developmental age when they're starting school. So nursery provision is a huge stepping stone for them to actually get up to the right level for actually starting school and being able to get the most from that. So that's the sort of questions along that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Winstanley. Lindsay, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. So the statutory minimum provision for nursery education is 10 hours per week, which is spread evenly over a week. As far as the reduction is concerned, you're absolutely right. It need to be managed very, very carefully, not just from a statutory point of view, from consultation, but also as a significant policy change. You know, that would be something that we'd need to undertake a variety of different assessments on. You touched upon the Welsh language assessment. That would be statutory in this basis. So there are three, in essence, impact assessments we'd undertake. It need to be an equality impact assessment, a financial impact assessment, which would be part of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act to make sure that no short-term decisions affect long-term viability, and also the Welsh language assessment, because we have a statutory duty to promote the Welsh language and not to disproportionately affect any particular group. With regard to the final point, I come from a primary teaching background. Certainly I valued nursery education as a very valuable part of primary education, and all practitioners will say exactly the same, particularly for the reasons you've just alluded to. With regard to the impact of the pandemic, we have seen learners start schools. I know myself, the leader, and Councillor Blundell have visited multiple schools this year, and all primary heads have confirmed to us the real issue of some of the challenges they've had with learners with poorer social skills. Toileting, for example, has been raised. So a number of areas where we've seen this impact, and nursery settings provide this valuable provision. How would we mitigate this going forward? We do particularly well with our non-maintained settings in Bridgend. However, there would be a significant challenge on them, because, as you know, the non-maintained setting across the UK has been in decline over the last couple of years. So we'd need to consider that as part of any decision-making process.
Thank you, Lindsay. Councillor Blundell.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Winstanley, for the question. I think this draft proposal that we have in front of us today, I think just as another point of that highlights that stark reality that we're in now. You know, I sit next to the leader, who I believe was the cabinet member who brought in 30 hours nursery provision that was protected under Alana Davis and Charles Smith. You know, in between there, this is not something that we ever would even consider putting in front of members today or the public, but this is where we are, and it drives home that stark reality of this is how bad this budget is. That for all the reasons outlined by Councillor Winstanley is the reason why it was brought in, is the why, you know, but this is where we are now. And going back to the argument of statutory and non-statutory, it's non-statutory to do 30 hours, it's statutory to do 10. So if we have to go to the statutory of the gold, bronze, silver, platinum, whatever we're calling them now, this is where we're going to drive down home to. So just to add on really to Lindsay's points there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Blundell. Before I bring in Councillor Hughes, do you have anything supplementary to add, Councillor Winstanley?
No, I'm content, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hughes?
Thank you. Why am I doing that?
I think you're okay. I think you're okay now.
Is it okay now? Obviously, sorry, there we are, better. I'm aware that discussions around full-time nursery provision have been have spoken about for a number of years. And obviously we're at a situation now where, where budgets, are really awful. So, for example, I'm just wondering how it would work. My sister lives in Llanharan, and my nephew has just started part-time at Dolau Meithrin. If he lived in Bridgend, he would be in nursery full-time, but he goes there from 9 till 12, I think. How does this tie in then with most other authorities are not providing full-time nursery anymore? And I know my sister accesses there's a 30-hour free childcare with the Welsh Government. So Rhys goes to a nursery that he went to before he started Dolau, and he goes there for some hours as well. Is that, is that an option? Would it have to be an option, I suppose, in Bridgend? What also concerns me there, though, is for me in the Ogmore Valley, is that lack of, as Lindsay mentioned just now, the provision. So we've got a new facility in Blackmill, which is empty currently, which would be a Welsh medium facility that ultimately working parents in Ogmore Valley, if their child could only access nursery provision part-time, if that facility was there, is that 30 hours that the government, provide, would they go there? Because ultimately, and I'd be interested in what the head of the primary school has to say, if you're looking at, none of these cuts, nobody wants to do them, but how does he feel, does he feel that actually the nursery provision going to part-time is a cut that he thinks he'd be willing to take if it meant funding, that maybe the 5% wasn't in the year or whatever. I mean, it's just, I do think this, and it's a political decision that needs to be made, isn't it? Because it's a policy. Are we at the point where we've got to say statutory is part-time? And unfortunately, that's where we are.
Thanks, Councillor Hughes. Perhaps I can bring in Mr. Lewis there then to see what his perspective is.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I've asked all head teachers to send me their thoughts on each of these lines, and there is an overriding feeling that this would be an appropriate decision. Bearing in mind all other local authorities we are led to believe do offer part-time. We acknowledge that families, children, schools have really benefited from full-time over many, many years at Bridgend, and it has been a flagship policy. And there is a stronger feeling, as Councillor Winstanley said, within specific clusters that the removal of full-time nurseries will have a devastating impact on our most deprived communities, as the children are coming in are already at a low baseline, so every hour counts. However, as a group of heads, we feel that there needs to be an all-Wales agreement rather than a postcode lottery, that if you're in RCT, as Councillor Hughes just said, you'll get a very different provision just across the border in Bridgend. But, we are aware the implication this decision will have on the workforce, our families, who are really going to be dependent on the education provision, and there are going to be wider impact fallout from this regards to loss in pupil numbers. We know there's going to be widespread redundancies on this decision as well. Families will need to change their plans, therefore they are going to require plenty of time. I understand Lindsay has mentioned the statutory consultation period, but that needs to be really considered with these families. There is the childcare offer out there. My concern is that what we're seeing in primary schools is that parents are often accepting the rising 3 places. For example, at Coity Primary School, we are full for our risers, but come January, only 7 turn up, because it's more advantageous for these families to stay in private provision and get full time. So we may see a different fallout that we're not considering here, where parents don't want the part-time in schools and they might go to private provision, which means nursery may not be viable at all. So there is an implication on this line, but generally the feeling is, to answer your questions, we need to be consistent with all local authorities, as unpalatable as that is.
Thank you very much for that perspective. Councillor Hughes, you content? Just one more for you, Mr. Lewis, if I may. The budget line says that it could potentially have a detrimental impact on educational standards. Now, I assume as we've said, this is a discretionary service. It's a gold-plated policy, as Councillor Blundell and Councillor David know. That would mean that other local authorities don't do it. So are our educational standards at entry level in your school and other primary schools that much better than other local authorities? Can you quantify that at all, or that statement in the narrative?
Unfortunately, we can't because we're no longer given any comparative data. So historically, Welsh Government would have harvested the on-entry baseline assessment, and we could have done some comparative information, but you can't, and every school would be very, very different. So we know in some of our most deprived areas, their on-entry baseline would be significantly lower than areas with lower free school meals. We know that happens. So we don't have that data to hand. One would argue that if nursery provision was there and it impacts positively on standards, we would be having the best standards in Wales if we're the only local authority to provide that provision. But we don't have that information, and Estyn won't share that either.
Okay, thanks. Thanks very much. That comprehensively answers that question. We've only got about 27 other lines to go through, so we'll move on, if we may, members, to EDFS 5, and that's the merging of schools. I know that Councillor Winstanley has got a question on this as well.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so obviously I can see that the indicative change to the budget is for future years, so I'm assuming that there's a consultation period involved, but what I wanted to ask is whether the merging of schools is that is planned already and in the public domain, or is this new schools that are to be merged?
Thank you, Lindsay.
Thanks, Chair. We've been obviously careful not to identify schools here. It would be subject to a number of exploratory investigations from the local authority. The reason we have to put it forward is, of course, what we are looking to do is to make best use of our school estate. And for example, if we've got schools that potentially have got issues with the fabric of the school building, and we'd look at perhaps enhancing or remodelling a different building and combining those schools, is something we have to look at. One of the challenges, and it's a good challenge to have in Bridgend, is of course nearly all of our schools have got very, very good standards. So of course anything with regard to EDFS 5 and EDFS 6 for that matter would have to be first and foremost made on educational grounds. So we'd need to look at that first and foremost. There couldn't be a significant detriment on doing either of these. And in addition, we'd have to look very closely at the realisable savings that would be achieved, because again, there are a number of issues, especially with EDFS 6, because they are linked in a number of ways with regard to alternative home to school transport arrangements, for example. So not as clear cut as they would appear.
Thanks very much, Lindsay. Councillor Winstanley? Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Bundle?
Yeah, it's just to add on to what Lindsay said there as well. We are sort of modelling what those costs may be, because in the long run it may not be viable to do that, because there's home school transport, but also of merging schools we probably have to, because I suspect one site won't be big enough to house both sets of children, so you'd have to build a new school, and as you can probably get when we get to our capital programme at one point, you'll see that it's ridiculously expensive now to build schools and only going one way. So these are all things we have to balance up before any sort of decisions are made. So that work is sort of carrying on now with officers in the Education Directorate. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Blundell. Councillor Williams, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. As Councillor Spiller has had to pop out, I can pick up his question as well as mine, and they were both, as it's been said, they are EDFS 5 and 6 are both linked, and they're quite similar. So Councillor Blundell has answered some of the questions that I had with regards to the home to school transport and the building of new schools, because you have to have the funding for that, but you also have to have the space, the land. And as I know with Coity Primary, trying to put an extension on there when it's a small piece of land, it's a very difficult thing to do. So some of these I think are almost impossible again, because it's more than just having the funding to build a new school or to extend a school. You have to have the physical land to do that. And when you talked about transport, when you're talking about merging and then closing schools, I couldn't differentiate between the two here, because you're closing an infant and merging it with a junior school. So you're in effect closing a school and then closing small schools. Well, they will then, by virtue of being closed, be merged with another school and be passed to that school. So I thought they were very linked. But then you've got the home to school transport, because they might be more than 3 miles away. You'll have to walk to those, you'll have to transport them. But also with the merging, my question came from, it's been proposed time and time again, particularly for comprehensive schools, that they work together now, and where one school can't provide some classes, another school will. And it's already happening in the borough. But, for example, Bryn Teg, where I'm also a LEA governor, are paying for taxis for children to attend other comprehensive schools to do a subject that's not covered in their school. That's coming out of their pot. Taxis are expensive. They've got a substantial bill they're having to pay for that. And so if we're going to, I know we'll be given answers in here about doing more of that in the future, but I've got concerns, and it comes into the Welsh element, which we've got further down here as well, because Bryn Teg, for example, have got 10 children doing A-level Welsh. Well, when you're making cuts to schools and then you're cutting staff, potentially, you're going to cut those subjects that have only got 10 children in a classroom because it's not financially viable. And then that impacts on our projection to have so many Welsh speakers in the borough, and or the school have got to fund a child going to another, which could be up to Llanganoid, and they could be travelling all that time. A taxi to there and back is going to be, and our children going to do that? So I think it's not covered here under merging schools, but I think it needs to be considered as well when we've given answers to, well, do those subjects in that other school or that college or something, because there are costs associated the schools will inevitably have to pick up. Thanks.
Thanks. It has knock-on ramifications, isn't it? Any comments from anyone, Lindsay?
Thanks, Chair. Just to agree with Councillor Williams, that there will be ramifications, and hence the reason they read. I mentioned earlier about the range of assessments we'd have to undertake. Certainly with both of these, there would be comprehensive consultation if this was decided to be moved forward. But in addition, there'd be an equality impact assessment, clearly. And as Councillor Williams has indicated, it could have impact on the Welsh language. Now, we have a statutory duty to promote it, so there would be a full Welsh language impact assessment involved as well.
Thanks. Councillor Williams, okay? Okay. You wanted to come in, Councillor Davies? Sorry.
Yeah, just on those proposals, as Cabinet colleagues will know, I've asked a number of questions myself along very similar lines. I think you've been eavesdropping on our meetings, have you, Councillor Williams? But that's what we need to be careful of, because we recognise, actually, throughout this set of budget proposals, there are proposals we recognise that sometimes have a knock-on impact on other areas and services, and we have to be very clear on these, that, for example, any additional homeschool transport costs and certainly any relocation or expansion costs of other schools don't outweigh the savings that are going to be made. But primarily, this would have to be about what is right for the education outcomes for children. That's quite clear under the school organisational code, and that will drive the decision making around this process, and of course that is very much laid out and prescribed within the relevant legislation, and we will have to ensure that we follow that legislation through this process. That's why it's not in this year's budget, it's in a future year's budget, and that's why it's down as red as well. And there'll have to be full engagement with members like yourself on whether or not we take this proposal forward, and there's a lot more work to do in not much time, because actually we're trying to think about not just next year's budget, but the budget the year after, and we need to do that work now on this proposal for future years. So some more work that has to be done very quickly, unfortunately. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Winstanley, you had a question on EDFS 6, I believe, on the closure of small schools.
Sorry, on similar lines, whether this was a concrete proposal or it's just floating something, because it's obviously needs to go through consultation and everything first.
That's fine. I think your questions will be noted, and I think that's been answered now, isn't it, Councillor Winstanley, if I'm correct? EDFS 7, I haven't had anyone indicating that they'd like to contribute on this, so we move to EDFS 8. and the increase in the price of school meals by 30 pence, and we've got Councillor Amanda Williams on this.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. It was simply to say that that's got a red, so we're saying it's potentially unachievable. But is that simply the 30 pence? Because I know in our previous meetings we've discussed that we are not already charging what we're paying out for meals. So is that simply covering the loss that we're making at the moment? Because with price increases, school food and everything will increase again. So are we going to be back requiring even more money? Will the 30 pence cover what we're paying, basically? And are we thinking that we might see some increases again in the cost of food? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Williams. And it also says that even with the 30 pence increase, Bridgend will still be in the bottom quartile of school meal provision across Wales. So what is the median, and why don't we consider increasing it gradually over the course of the next number of months and years, so that we're in line with the median price? Perhaps you can take both of those questions, Lindsay.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Williams. First of all, just some context, really. We'll all be aware that from September 24, all children in primary education in Bridgend will have a free school meal, or the offer of a free school meal. So obviously that mitigates some of the impact this would have from September. With regard to the 30% increase, absolutely is right what it says in the narrative there. I think we are the lowest, or one of the lowest certainly, currently, of what we charge for a school meal. We've had an increase, as I understand it, Debbie, from Welsh Government for funding for school meals. So that's certainly mitigated it. But as Councillor Williams says, this is a cost recovery increase. It would bring us more in line with covering the costs of the school meal. So again, but it's quite short term, so delaying it, obviously, from September, from primary schools, it wouldn't be available to us anyway.
Okay, and just on my point, Lindsay, about perhaps bringing it in line with the median, is that something which you consider as an income generation?
We could do, Chair. I think it's almost the rule of diminishing marginal utility, really. If you increase it too much, then you might have a drop off from that income of people not buying those meals. So I think we've tried to pitch it about right, we feel.
Yeah, as you say, it might negate any savings or limit take-up, yeah. Okay, thank you very much. EDFS 9 then, the cessation of adult community learning provision. I believe Councillor Winstanley has a question on this.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my question is twofold. One is, to what extent does the current adult community learning offer help people back into education and back into jobs, and therefore could removing adult community education then have an impact on economic viability, because you'd have less people able to earn, and so therefore not able to contribute as much?
Thank you very much. Lindsay? Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor. It's a very fair point, and I know this is something that Cabinet have asked us to look very carefully at, because obviously we don't want to have any sort of economic disturbance around this. There are a number of mitigating factors we're going to try and put in place if this proposal is realised. Obviously, we work very closely with Bridgend College. We work very closely with other partners in the adult education sphere. We'll continue to work with them to explore opportunities. Also, with regard to employability, we have Employability Bridgend within the council that do a fantastic job. And what we're trying to do is to work very closely with them so it doesn't impact too adversely on those areas. For adult community learning, I'm sure you'll all be aware they've recently been inspected by Estin. They're a very good inspection. But I think it's, again, goes back to the argument we looked at earlier, although this is not a cut that any of us wish to make. It is a non-statutory function, and we believe with some of the mitigating factors we can put in place, it can be delivered differently through other partners.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Blundell, do you want to add anything?
I was just going to say, obviously, we'll still continue to work closely with Employability Bridgend, who are an excellent service that we provide here in the council, and we will probably rely on them a bit more going forwards to deliver some of this, and obviously point out to people who are in need of retraining of where those opportunities are with, say, the college or other places of higher learning.
Thank you very much. Councillor Winstanley, you consent to that?
Yes, and I'd like to echo the praise for employability as well.
Thank you. I'm coming back to you as well for EDFS 10, and that's the reduction in the Education Welfare Service.
Thank you. So my question is, how is it planned to do this? What is actually put in place?
Thanks, Lindsay.
Thanks, Chair. This is a difficult one. There's no doubt about this. One of the main directives from Welsh Government has been to look at school attendance. Over many years, Bridgend has been in the top quartile with regard to school attendance. This has much to do with the excellent work of head teacher colleagues working very closely with the Education Welfare Service. We've seen a disturbance in this over the last 4 years, definitely in line with the pandemic, as other local authorities have seen. But very recently, you'll recall that we put in place a new strategy around school attendance that's certainly seen growth in the primary attendance up to around 94%, which is new, hot off the press data, which is very, very good news. And similarly in the secondary sector, up towards 89-90%. So really, really positive. The impact we need to manage very carefully. It's a non-statutory service, but obviously this is a significant cut being proposed to the service. You have around a quarter of the service. So one of the things we'll aim to do, we'll aim to explore all options with schools in a new strategy. We'll also aim to make full use of education engagement officers as well to support this going forward. But it's certainly something we're keen to see the terms and conditions of the new grant from Welsh Government, because we think that this could support this area as well.
Thank you for that comprehensive reply. Councillor Winstanley, you contend?
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Williams?
Almost pressed the wrong microphone then, sorry. Yeah, I'm picking up Councillor Spiller's notes on here with his question. He linked it in to the well-being, and attendance is linked in to behaviour as well. So COVID and children not attending school has resulted in a decline in behaviour. So poor behaviour has come from that. So he wondered what impact that will also have on behaviour, because staff at the moment, and he's coupled this in with EDFS 12, staff at the moment are struggling with behaviour, particularly in comprehensive schools. There has been a sharp decline and a lot of input required with all of that. So if I can just couple that in, because educational psychology service is also on there, so it's attendance and behaviour together. Because I know some schools also have their own psychologists and social workers to support, and if schools are making budget cuts, then those are the people who may be cut because they're a nice to have, not a requirement, like a teacher to teach the subject. So I wondered if there's any knock-on effects from that, which could then have a knock-on effect with MASH, another service through the local authority, and having all referrals sent to them because schools can't cope with the decline in behaviour as a result of it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Lindsay, please.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Williams. I agree. In a lot of ways, a reduction in these areas will lessen the effect on schools. Jonathan Lewis, my primary head teacher colleague, mentioned earlier, is one of the challenges we have within the proposals is not just the direct impact on school budgets, but also some of the complementary services, as I'll call them. So Councillor Williams quite rightly identifies EWS, EPS, the Education Psychology Service, and with your permission, Chair, if we can also refer to EDFS 19, the Communication Relationships Team, which looks at pupil behaviour in schools. Clearly, we can't keep doing what we're doing with the cost of some of these services. All of them are non-statutory, but what we are needing to do is to make sure that we, A, meet our statutory requirements in all these fields, especially around assessments and behaviour support. But one of the things that head teachers present will be aware of, I've recently commissioned a task and finish group to look at exclusions in schools, and obviously the allied issue to that is pupil behaviour, and it's something that we're hoping to prepare a strategy for and bring to Cabinet, hopefully in the summer term. So hopefully that will help. But just to emphasise the point that Councillor Williams has quite rightly made, there will be reductions in these services. We have to do things differently, and there will be pressures on the system as a result of these cuts if they progressed.
Councillor Williams, content with the reply?
Yes, and I'll pick it up when we come to at the end with the the well-being of future generations, because I got something in there because it does affect all of that. And ironically, I had a conflicting meeting that I had to decline today to come to this, and it was a pupil exclusion meeting, and I've had many of those since COVID, and I hadn't sat on any before. So, you know, behaviour has changed, and I think we do need to, even though it's not statutory, you know, people's behaviour, we do need to consider that, because if we're not tackling behaviour, it's going to be teaching staff, because I've seen reports in other local authorities where staff are threatening to go on strike because poor behaviour of pupils, and we don't want to push our teaching staff, our head teachers, out of the profession because there's no support for things like that, because at the end of the day they are there to teach children, not to be children's social workers and to look after children. They're there to teach, and they came into the profession to teach, and so we need to make sure that they are able to go there and to teach. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Yeah, we already referred to some of the ramifications of the reduction in schools delegated budgets, didn't we? And they were highlighted as increase in staff absence, low staff morale, the increase in referrals of behaviour. So they were all ramifications of the reductions in these services. Perhaps I can yield to educational colleagues and see what their perspective is on these particular budget lines and how they're going to affect primary school and secondary school education. Mr. Lewis?
Yeah, in relation to EFS 10, head teachers feel that the decision around cutting this service is off kilter with the national local priorities. Should the service be reduced, it'll just have a significant impact on our children across all education sectors. We know that non-attendance, school refusal are usually symptomatic of something else, and normally Educational Welfare Service can work with families to unpick those reasons. But without that resource, I think the situation will further deteriorate. I think the Minister for Education and the Welsh Language said in June that the schools are doing excellent work, but they can't do this on their own. If we cut services, we will be on our own. He tweeted 3 hours ago about the importance of attendance in relation to Eston releasing their thematic report today on attendance, which cited recommendations to the local authority that ensure that the local authority interventions build on work already carried out by schools. If we're depleting services, there aren't going to be interventions to support these families, so it is going to be concerning, and the direct impact is going to be on pupils and their behaviour.
Thank you very much. Ms. Castle, anything further to add?
Yeah. Just to really to say that obviously it's all symbiotic, isn't it? So in terms of attendance and behaviour and well-being, I'd like to thank councillors for making those links, because they do very much go hand in hand. And if we're cutting our own provision within school, again, councillors have been right in identifying that it's some of those staff that probably might need to be the people that are cut, and so the problem is compounded. And we just can't walk away from that. Really, we have to acknowledge that. I think that yes, there has been a change in behaviour since the pandemic. We also have to look at the knock-on effect to communities, because if we're looking at attendance and children not attending school, some of the antisocial behaviour, unfortunate, that we see within communities as well is compounded by not being in school, by well-being issues. So we mustn't look at this as just one isolated factor. There is so much connectivity between all of these points. So reduction in things like Education Welfare Service, the CART team, will be, again, very challenging for schools, because schools will not have the staff to pick up those roles either. So there will be gaps, and you know, who's going to cover those gaps? How are we going to cover those gaps? And they lead to, you know, quite significant challenges for children if we're not able to put in the right provision for them.
Yeah, thank you both for those illuminating responses and for highlighting the interconnectivity of all of the different issues, and they can't be seen in their own individual silos. Thank you very much both for that contribution. We are now moving with Councillor Williams's consent, and because you've got your hand raised again, to Councillor Spiller, who's returned to us, and EDFS 13 and 14, and that's ALN, Additional Learning Needs Provision. Have I missed one? Oh, apologies. EDFS 11, I'm getting ahead of myself. That is Councillor Williams, Central South Consortium. Apologies.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm glad I did leave my hand up as a legacy hand, but I'll claim it that I was planning to for that. Yeah, so mine was two elements to this. I can see there's a proposed reduction to CSE for next year, but no further saving. So I wondered if this can be explained, because it's an eye-watering amount of money that we're giving to somebody else Now, I've had support, our school have had support from CSC, both schools I'm a governor at, but I'm struggling to see £500,000 worth of support. So I'd like to potentially hear from head teachers as to whether they think they're getting value for money. And it's another reason why I asked about staffing structures, because it'd be interesting to see if there's any roles that are duplicated. Do we have roles that are liaisons with CSE that could potentially take those on? But are we also, is our in-house team, do we have experience? Have we got old head teachers in that team who can use their skills? Because I think that's what CSC is made up of, is head teachers. So I just wondered if we could have some information on that, please. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Brundle has indicated, then I'll bring in some head teachers.
Thank you, Chair. I will take on the first question on about why a cut this year but no further cuts. So, number one, the cut is to Social Consortium, and obviously all other local authorities in that are making similar cuts, if not slightly more. But the point is why this year, not in future years, is because there's currently a review in the middle tier going on at the moment in education in Wales by the Minister and Welsh Government. So we're not sure what's going to be there to replace it going forward. So there's no point saying we'll do a cut in 2 years' time if we don't know what's going to be there. Is fundamentally the facts. I don't know if Lindsay has any more to add on to that, but I want to hear from head teachers as well. That's CSC. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'll yield to head teachers then. Mr. Lewis or Ms. Castle have any comments on Councillor Williams's remarks on Central South?
If it's okay, Councillor Williams, I think in the years that I've been coming, I think you might have asked this every year. And I just want to apologise as well. I had a bit of a problem with the light, and so I might have made you all a bit motion sick as I moved my camera around, but I'm back. So yes, every year we get asked about the kind of this, and I think that we know that there is a consultation on at the moment, and all head teachers, thankfully, have been able to be part of that. And I think we've been very honest about what we think about the support that we receive. I think that there needs to be improvements. If I'm frank, there would need to be improvements. I think that I currently am in a position where I have a very good challenge advisor. That's a change. School improvement partner, that's a change. Every year we talk to you about variation and about maybe not a lack of consistency. I think that still exists. There probably are some retired head teachers in the borough. Your suggestion, I quite like the sound of that. I'm getting near to that age myself, so I particularly like the sound of that. But I think that we do need to tap into what we have. I don't know if we have the resource within Bridgend, though. That we've got to be realistic. So I don't know, Jonathan, if you want to add anything else to that.
Thank you very much.
No, to add to what Hannah's already said, I think there's variability. It's down to the relationship between the head teacher, the improvement partner, and the quality of support that's provided. So colleagues will talk about that difference between the different offices or different improvement partners you get. Head teachers feel that if we're going to protect frontline services, this does need further consideration, and I assume we are waiting on the middle tier review to decide which direction the authority goes in. But ultimately, when we're looking at this 5% cut, we do need to look at things seriously to protect frontline services for our children, to make sure that people are in front of them directly. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sure in 30 years' time, when you both retire, your support will be invaluable. Right, I told members and invitees that the chamber is required at 3 p.m. So can I encourage members to be as brief as possible and for answers to be as brief as possible while still retaining the important comprehensive content. So EDFS 12 has been dealt with by Councillor Williams on behalf of Councillor Spiller previously. So we'll now go to EDFS 13 and 14, and that's ALN, and that is Councillor Spiller.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. And I really appreciate that introduction before I ask a question as well. So I'll keep it succinct. I think mine is going to pick back up on 12 as well, which is last year in Scrutiny, Health Board representatives said that any cut to education would be detrimental to children, their well-being, and in turn social services. Now, last year we cut education by 2%. There were proposals then to cut it by a further 1%, and so on and so forth. This year we're proposing 5%, and then obviously further cuts. So how will this be mitigated in these budget proposals?
Thank you for that brief question. Lindsay?
Thanks. Can I just check, are you referring to EDFS 12?
EDFS 12, 13 and 14, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, thank
so
you.
ALN and the Educational Psychology Service.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Spiller. So I'll try my best to answer those. They're all interlinked, you're quite right. So when we look at the Education Psychology Service, clearly there's a raft of legislation they need to comply with regard to the recent Additional Learning Needs and Education Tribunal Act. One of the biggest changes has been the introduction of IDPs, Individual Development Plans, as opposed to SEN plans. So again, they're working through this, and the statutory ALN team support them in the paperwork and the meetings and making sure that we are complying with the Act and the timescales. By reducing these, there's going to be two particular impacts. One, there'll be a longer waiting time or a longer assessment time for learners. And in addition to that, there will be a longer time for us to release information to parents. So it will slow the process down, there's no doubt about that. Currently in Bridgend, I think we referred to this in previous scrutiny meetings, although the waiting list is still too long, we still got to bring it down. It compares quite favourably with other local authorities. But I say that with no glee, Chair, because we need to reduce it further. So what will we do to mitigate it? What we're trying to do is to make sure, with regard to the EPS, for example, the Education Psychology Service, is we're working very closely with HE institutions, for example, and making sure that we try to get the best graduates that are coming out of university at an early stage. We've just recruited one now, obviously much less expensive to have one of those with us. Very, very capable colleague, and obviously they trained up using the significant experience we have within our teams. With regard to the ALN team, the one thing we've done there is looking at a combination of how our business function, EDSU, combines with them on making sure they support the paperwork and the meetings. So again, a number of internal processes in place to support that. But just going back to Councillor Spiller's substantive point, will it impact with this? Yes, it will, and it will slow down the process.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Councillor Spiller?
Thank you very much, Chair. Really just highlighting 13 and 14, where we're proposing 9% budget cuts on both. Can I have a head teacher's perspective, please, on the risk associated with that for early identification and the longer assessment times, please, Chair?
Thanks very much, Councillor Spiller. Mr. Lewis?
Thank you, Councillor Spiller. Yeah, I think it's alarming. These services are already stretched and unable to meet current demand. In the opinion of head teachers, they should be ring-fenced and budgets increased because we know the complexities of children coming into education at early years, at secondary, and Hannah's talked about behaviour. They're complex needs of children. If we haven't got the services there to assess, to do the observations, to support the wider education system, we are going to have wider impact on children that could result in exclusions. So the assessment period is really, really important, and to expedite that is vital for the child's growth and development. The longer the assessment period equals the longer that the child receives appropriate provision, because you need to identify what that child needs. So under the Act, it calls the additional learning provision, or ALP. If we have these provisions cut, we're not going to meet the ALP of the child, and we will always try our very best, but it's going to be very, very challenging.
Thank you very much. Ms. Castle, do you have anything further to add? Or?
Yeah, very similar. And just to say as well, if we can't meet the ALP, then we're going to be faced with legal challenge as well. So that's something that we need to factor in, increasing pressures on us. And yeah, that's not a good cut.
Thank you very much. Councillor Spiller, you content?
I'm content. I think the message from head teachers is fairly clear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. EDFS 15 then, and the bridge alternative provision, and I believe that's Councillor Williams.
Yes, thank you very much. This is something I touched on briefly when I said I've looked at how much we're spending per pupil in the borough, and the bridge I think is one of the highest again because of the complex nature of the individuals who go there. So it was basically a cut to their 5% to their cost per pupil would be significant, and I've got considerable concerns there that, like it says, there could be insufficient staff to pupil ratios. That's going to impact on our staff again, as I've mentioned in the past. We're going to have staff leaving the profession because these are difficult children as well for them to be dealing with. So I have significant concerns there. So, but I don't know if there's an answer to or a question there other than what will happen to these children, because they are some of our most vulnerable.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Lindsay, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just to offer some comfort really on this particular element, we've been working with the Bridge over a number of years now on the ALN review, and we are looking currently to work with colleagues in health to review the hospital education provision charges. Now that will recoup some of the costs from schools, so again that will certainly alleviate some of the pressures there. Also, we're looking at restructuring the admin function with this and supporting them with additional finance support. So again, this will alleviate some of the financial administrative pressures. One of the issues with this one, again, we work closely with the school because one of the things we're hoping to do is to recruit a Welsh Medium Learning Support Officer to the school. Now, obviously, that would not progress. But one thing we are looking to do is, within part of our emergence service, is to look at whether or not we could use that facility across both settings. So again, lots of mitigation in place here, but again, a challenging environment. Learners here with significant emotional, social and behavioural difficulties, and they require those additional staff, hence the additional funding.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Councillor Williams, content? Thank you very much. I don't have anyone indicating on EDFS 16, but I think that's been covered more or less by Councillor Spiller's questions on learning support and staffing reductions earlier on. You do you? Oh, sorry. Councillor Williams then. Or Councillor Hughes, sorry, is first, is she?
My fault. I should have put it up for the last one.
Apologies.
Sorry. I just wanted to ask, so that cut there to the Bridge, so does their overall budget have the cut in the 5% to schools, and then this is another cut on top of that? And I just wanted to say, given that, you look at children in mainstream schools now who, for whatever reason, need a bespoke curriculum, and the Bridge, it would be an alternative provision for those children. It's just such a shame, because I've spoken to an ex-staff member of the Bridge who says it's the best place they've ever worked, and the impact it has on those most vulnerable children, it's amazing. So is it a 5% cut and then this on top of it? Just wanted to check. Thank you.
Councillor Hughes. Lindsay?
Thanks, Chair. It's separate budget, Councillor Hughes. But again, one of the points, and I will take that back to the team, because it's lovely to have that feedback. They are an excellent team. They work extremely hard, and the head of the Bridge, I'm sure, would welcome those comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hughes. You content? Yeah. Thank you so much. We've got 1 minute per item now, everyone. So we'll go to Councillor Williams for EDFS 16.
Thank you very much. It was about the reduction in support staff, and I know we've touched on some of the support staff that might go, but at the moment, I think, particularly in primary schools, and as a governor there, I'm finding that we're losing classroom assistants left, right and centre because of the pay terms and conditions and the holidays off. We've lost classroom assistants to work in Tesco, Costa, opticians, everywhere. And I think we're going to be in a crisis point soon, because our experienced and highly skilled staff will be leaving the profession to work where they can get more money and a 12-month contract. And we're going to be in a crisis point when we're already saying we're going to be cutting support staff as well, and we'll be losing, and we are losing good staff now. So I wondered, what are we doing to ensure that we're not going to lose these highly skilled members of staff? Thanks.
Yeah, incentivising these invaluable staff. Lindsay, any comments? Perhaps I can ask head teachers as well.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Williams. Head teachers will echo those sentiments. We have exactly the same issues with central staff as well. We've lost a lot of staff, not just within learner support, but also within business support under catering, that have decided to look for alternative employment, albeit maybe an extension of hours or different terms and conditions. It's been very, very difficult because we don't have obviously much more to offer them with regard to additional hours or where they are. We are looking at a number of areas at the moment. One thing that's brought up by head teachers, which is a really helpful thing, is to look at whether or not we can localise contracts around one school, for example, because that would help out a lot of colleagues, as we've been informed. We're currently working with HR on that. But it is inevitable. We are seeing better rates of pay by other employers, and there is a choice for individuals.
Yeah, certainly a conundrum, Lindsay, and I'm sure head teacher colleagues would echo that. I assume nothing to add, really. No. Shake of the head there. It's a very difficult situation. Thank you, Councillor Williams, for that intervention, though, and I'm sure we'll all agree with it. EDFS 17, back over to you, I believe, Councillor Williams. That's on school modernisation budgets.
Yes, school modernisation budgets. We've got £22,000 saving, and we've got it as green. But I thought that the budget is extremely low in the first instance for what we actually are responsible for in the borough, and I wondered why it was so low. And then we're taking 11% off that budget. That seems to me so it says it could result in challenges in respect of site maintenance. This could also impact on the delivery of some capital projects. So I just wondered why it was so low, and then we're taking a significant chunk of that away. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Lindsay?
Thanks, Chair. That solely relates to the budget of the team itself, so not the capital budget that is associated with it or the revenue budget for maintaining some of the bills. Essentially, what we'd be looking at there is we'd be looking at reducing administrative capacity within the team. This would impact on things like minute taking for meetings, referrals back to Welsh Government. There will also be an impact upon how fast we can turn around school places. So it's more an administrative cut rather than any cut to the overall budget.
Thank you very much. Content? Thank you so much. I haven't got anyone indicating for EDFS 18 unless I'm incorrect. Councillor Hughes is indicated though. No, legacy hand. EDFS 19 has been covered, I believe, by a previous comment, which Councillor Williams raised on behalf of Councillor Spiller. And then we go to EDFS 20, and Councillor Williams has something to raise on the Welsh in Education Strategic Plan.
I've raised this because it was to do with struggling to maintain A-level Welsh in schools if we're going to be making cuts to education and to school budgets, because it will impact on the Welsh. And I know Councillor Tim Thomas had a question I think he sent on to you as well, didn't he?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you for jogging my memory. It was regarding the recruitment and incentivising Welsh medium teachers from STEM subjects. They're at a critical point in sustaining Welsh medium education in this particular area. Just wondering whether you can comment on that, Lindsay. And I'll pick up further comments about the Welsh medium education later on. Also, as a rider to what Councillor Williams raised earlier on, what liaison have you had with stakeholders such as the Welsh Education Forum and RAG about some of the proposals which affect the budget reduction proposals to Welsh medium education?
Thanks, Chair. To answer Councillor Thomas's question with regard to recruitment issues, absolutely would reflect that, not just in STEM, actually. We're seeing some recruitment issues in all Welsh medium schools, but certainly for post-16 STEM, for the purpose of recording, it's science, technology, engineering and maths specialists. That's a useful jog for my memory there, actually, because Welsh Government, we're looking to produce a report on this, so I'll find out where that is, so I'll take that away from this meeting. With regard to engagement from the WEF and RAG, none as yet. Obviously, the proposals are for following years with regard to direct impacts, but clearly they would be important consultees as part of the Welsh Language Impact Assessment.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. I believe now we are moving to Councillor Blundell.
Thank you. Sorry, no, it's just to add on to what Lindsay said there. There is representation from the Welsh language teaching profession on the school budget forum as well. I believe it's the head of Barogu who sits on the budget forum, so they are aware of all this, of all these budget proposals for you today, because we discussed it last week in budget forum. So just to say, there is representation from Welsh and obviously faith schools on that body. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Blundell. I don't believe anyone's got anything on EDFS 21, so perhaps I can ask another Welsh language question, which I've been asked to raise by Councillor James and Councillor Penhale-Thomas, who don't sit on this committee, and that's relating to home to school transport for Welsh medium schools. There's been some concern, especially from the head teacher of Ysgol Gyfun Llangynoed, about even the viability of Welsh language education at his school if home to school transport for post-16 students is cut. So is it possible for you to comment upon that? And perhaps I can ascertain whether there's any possibility that post-16 education is continued for this protected characteristic. Is it a protected characteristic of Welsh medium language? I assume it is, if it's a national priority and a local government priority to promote the Welsh language. Is there any possibility in differentiating between different students? Because obviously home to school transport plays a crucial role in ensuring that children within the county borough can access this education provision. Lindsay?
Thanks, Chair. So first of all, it's a statutory requirement on the local authority to promote the Welsh language. That's clear in legislation. In addition to that, the comments from the head teacher, I'm obviously cognizant of these concerns, and as part of this, we'll obviously look at that as part of the Welsh language impact assessment before any policy decisions are made. Clearly, we would look at not impacting negatively on any Welsh medium setting, because we'd have to make sure that it didn't adversely affect on our statutory requirement, if you see what I mean. But this will all be part of the statutory consultation and all be part of the impact assessments we'll have to undertake before any change in policy.
That's useful. Thank you. I'll pass on the message to the councillors who raised that with me. EDFS 22, we have another couple of contributors, and that's Councillor Winstanley and then Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. I was going to come in. It was one of those questions where it's difficult to decide whether it comes in on 20 or 22. But I wanted to raise the post-16 school transport. Because I am concerned that it might be detrimental for young people to carry on with their education if there is no post-16 transport. I certainly remember as a youngster, I had to catch 2 buses to get to a sixth form college, but that was a bus pass that was paid for by the local authority. I'm concerned that because transport generally and buses generally in the area are, there isn't the transport around, there isn't the bus services around, how are young people, particularly in more rural locations, going to get to the provision that they would like to get to?
Thank you very much, Councillor Winstanley. Councillor Blundell has indicated first, and then I'll bring in Lindsay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Winstanley, for the question. It's a very valid point, and it's one we're going to have to go through during the consultation. I guess it's another one of those where we come back to the statutory, non-statutory argument. This is non-statutory, but then again, it's also it's almost like the third tier of quasi-statutory, of where it really should be statutory to encourage post-16 learning and have that transport to go with it. They would have had it, especially for sixth form, if they were there in year 11 and then they go into year 12 and it's not there, and to college and so on. So we'll have to bore all that out in the consultation, and as we said, we're bringing that paper forward. But you're quite right, but then this is the argument of statutory, non-statutory. If we're going to cut non-statutory services, this is where we're at in that level. So it's why that argument is a complicated one. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do you have anything to add? I don't think Lindsay has anything to add. So, Councillor Winstanley, are you happy?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Councillor Hughes?
Thank you. So just the saving of 792,000 there then. So is that literally for removing nursery transport and removing the post-16 transport? and this might be my lack of understanding, we also provide 3 miles for comp and 2 miles for primary schools. So do all authorities in Wales do that? Because I just remember a little while ago there was talk of it coming down to 2.5 miles for comp and 1.5 mile for primary schools. Is that being considered, thought about, or are we thinking, is that what we're waiting for the Welsh Government for? Sorry for my lack of understanding. Just some clarification.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Lindsay?
Thanks, Chair. No, not at all. I think it's really important questions, Councillor Hughes. Most, if not all, local authorities in Wales are gravitating towards the 2 or 3. Most of that in play. Obviously, there are some discretionary allowances within that, especially for learners with additional learning needs. So it's a different model in different local authorities, but most local authorities 2 and 3 miles. With regard to what we propose in the CAT, it goes back to the paper that Councillor Brindle has referred to, we're working on at the moment. We're looking on a raft of ideas here, not just looking at cutting, so we're looking at doing things differently. These are quite developed, actually. I can't go into detail at this time, because it obviously has a bit more work. But there's a range of issues where we've learned from different practice across the world, actually, and hoping to bring them into policy in Bridgend and through consultation. And we think some of them actually will be really well received by the public. So again, that'll come forward in due course.
Thank
That's
you very much,
great.
Lindsay. You okay,
Lovely,
Councillor Hughes?
thank you.
Yes?
Yeah, great, thank you.
Thank you very much. Rapidly moving on to EDFS 23, and that's the reduction in catering services maintenance budget, and over to Councillor Williams.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. This again is concerning, particularly with the free school meals that come in, the universal free school meals for primary schools. There's going to be potentially more children now eating and opting for school meals, which will take its toll on kitchen equipment because they'll be cooking more meals. Some schools haven't got kitchens yet to provide those meals. Costs go up as well with regards to replacing items. So if we have to produce free school meals and we haven't got the equipment, we're not going to be able to comply with what we're required to do. So that's my first thing. How will we ensure that every child continues to get a meal under the universal free school meals? And then obviously comprehensive children, how will they continue to be fed if we're cutting this budget? And then it also says about the legislation from April 2024 for food recycling. I wondered if we could have some information from the head teachers as to how much this food recycling, I agree with recycling and I agree with food recycling, I recycle all of mine, but how much is this costing schools as well, which is a new factor that will have to come out of their budgets as well? Thanks.
Thank you very much. Can I invite head teachers to respond?
Yeah, I can give a brief response because in terms of the recycling, it's going to be new for us. So I can't give you really detailed answers. We had a representation at School Budget Forum talking through the recycling and the changes that we're going to need to enforce. And we're all going to be getting visits soon to our schools to go through what that process is going to look like for us and the reality of that. So this is another new a new area for us, a new kind of like aspect that we're going to have to factor in. So I'm not really a fay, and I don't feel like I can give you a good enough answer really in terms of what that impact is going to be. But it's going to be fussy and it's going to be difficult and it's not going to be straightforward. And I don't mean to sound negative with that, but it's just the segregation of the plastics and the food and the cans and all of that within the context of a school setting, and then the collection and the complexities that's going to come with that. I know it's not necessarily going to be as straightforward as it is for us when we're managing it within our homes. Jonathan, you probably know a little bit more as well.
I'd like to say I do, but I don't. We are options to help children with the recycling process. We're costing that up today, so that's an additional cost we haven't thought about, is the recycling buildings. If we're going to have to pay by them ourselves, that's an additional burden on to schools, but we don't have all the information at this moment in time to share that with councillors.
Thanks very much for your contribution. Do we have any supplementary remarks from the chamber? I can't see anyone indicating. So, Councillor Hughes, you'd like to come in? No? Okay. We now move to, that's with permission of Councillor Williams. You don't want to add anything further on that? No. Okay, we now move to a series of references, budget reduction proposals regarding staffing from EDFS 24. I believe 25 has been dealt with already, but 24, 25, 27, 29, and Councillor Spiller wanted to raise issues regarding those groups of budget reduction proposals. So perhaps I can ask him to intervene now.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, really referring first of all to the curriculum for Wales, which intertwines health and well-being as one of the key areas of learning, and obviously well-being is being woven through other areas of the curriculum as well. And I'll read you a part from the Future Generations Wales, which said, "We make it our mission to facilitate a transformation in the way we keep people healthy, with a greater focus on prevention and the long term. As a result, public bodies are working together to tackle the root causes of ill health and addressing health and inequality." I then look forward to the children's mental health statistics as published by the Children's Society, which show 1 in 6 children aged 5 to 16 are likely to have a mental health problem. 55% of 16 to 25-year-olds say they have seen their GP about mental health at some point in their life. And 50% of all mental health problems start by the age of 14. So my question really is with regards to the review of staffing structures within early help. Do the head teachers feel that any reduction in this budget would be viable? And their opinion, would we actually be in breach of our duty of care under the future well-being of future generations?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Spiller. I'm not sure whether head teachers can directly answer that, but Mr. Lewis is going to give it a go.
I'm going to try my very best. So early help is a fantastic service that schools access. I've had the privilege of working in 4 local authorities from London and throughout South Wales, and I've not come across this service before. It's been transformational for families, for children. We've managed to support children for school refusers to get back into school because they build on systematic relationship between home and school. They really unpick what some of the mental health issues are. Where we're unable to access children's services because children do not meet threshold, we do go down to early help, and early help ordinarily will pick up children to support them, and they are very, very passionate about supporting children and families. They're the biggest advocate for these people, and if they lost this service, it would be a challenge for everyone. They are the backbone between, or the splint between home and school. They work between us. They make sure relationships are key. Where families feel that they've broken down relationships with the school, they can rebuild them and have positively impact on children's mental health. It's all about relationships, and they can also signpost families who may not know where to go in a situation of crisis, may not have the funds to go. They'll take the children to appointments. They're an absolute amazing service, and I think they were acknowledged. I think Lindsay said in the JIGPA recently, and I think without that service, we would get a terrible situation because we know that children's services won't be able to take these families on. So where there's going to be a missing gap if you start ebbing away at this level of provision, and they are very proactive in supporting everyone, the school, the child, the family, and anyone involved. Sorry, I went on a bit.
Thank you. Thank you, that's very useful. Ms. Castle, do you have anything else to add? Or
Yeah, I think what I would add, if that's okay, is that this is another case where we mustn't look at things in silos and we mustn't look at things symbiotically. So if we think about the impact of the reduction of early help coupled with the 5% cuts and some of the key staff that we would have in schools, that probably we will not be able to replace any vacant positions, or we might actually need to make redundancies, then in simple language, like a double whammy, really, in some cases. And that's really my concern. You know, we're so grateful that you have invited us here today. I think that obviously we are advocates for children today, and during this process, we are their voice. And these cuts, it's the children. You know, the statistics that you shared with us, Councillor Skinner, you know, they're important, and we can't shy away from those. The reality is that we see an increasing need for support for young people. The cuts from the services like early help, coupled with the 5% cuts in schools, is going to be impactful. And I don't know, you asked about our duty of care. That's something that sits heavy with us, isn't it? And obviously, you know, nobody, I can tell from the directorate here today, nobody wants to make these cuts. We understand that, but we do need to factor in the impact that it's going to have. So thank you for raising it. Thank you for asking us the question. It's a difficult one to answer.
Yeah, and thank you for such comprehensive answers which you've given today. I'll go back to Councillor Spiller now.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add a personal perspective onto this for members, really. I've actually needed, via my children, to access early help before. And that service truly does save people's lives. And to even see that as a 10% reduction is going to increase child suicides. And I'm flabbergasted with everything that we have on mental health in the world today that that's even a consideration. And I thank the head teachers for their very heartfelt, responses. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Spiller. No, the leader wants to come in.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I think we all recognise the importance of early help, as has been outlined, and thank you for the contribution from head teachers. And I hope they weren't planning on doing anything for the rest of the day, because it looks like they're here for the duration. There is a proposal within the budget growth to actually see a net increase in the budget for early help of £372,000. So there's a proposal to increase the budget. There's a reduction in part of the service, but overall there is a growth in the service. That's if the budget's accepted, because I've also heard today people saying they don't want to cut this, they don't want to cut that, they don't want to cut that, they don't want to cut that, they don't want to cut that. Well, I don't want to cut a lot of what's been proposed. But if we don't, we'll need to identify another set of reductions, alternative proposals. But on that one, just a point of clarity, if the budget growth proposals are accepted, and I think it was Councillor Spiller that indeed queried that one earlier, then if that is accepted, there would be a net increase in early help, because we recognise, as Councillor Spiller's quite rightly identified, early help is better than wherever we can. We want to step in and prevent a situation escalating to crisis point, and we see early help as being part of that. But we also see that early help, like every service, needs to make an efficiency saving and needs to contribute to the overall savings. And that is why early help is here, and that is why it is flagged as a green as well. It is not identified as a red or amber saving, is it, Lindsay, currently? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Leader, for providing those assurances. I hope that's comforting to Councillor Spiller and others who are concerned about that budget line, but given the budget growth in the area, perhaps that will be mitigated. So thank you for that intervention. I'm afraid we are going to be chucked out of this room in 20 minutes, so we have to expedite our consideration of the remaining matters. I believe, Councillor Spiller, you've covered off what you want to do on 24 to 29. Do you have anything else to add? No? I think the only other two items that I've got on my list, unless anyone wants to intervene, is item 30. Councillor Williams wanted to raise something regarding clarification on item 30. Is that correct?
Myself? No, I think, yeah, edge of care. We were wondering what edge of care was, but I just wanted to come in briefly as well for my final thing on the cuts and the redundancies that we've been talking about. But I also wanted to say, having listened to head teachers today and having spoken to a number of other head teachers, I know they're all having sleepless nights about this. And I really feel that we need to make sure that they're all supported through all of this, because these are brutal cuts and we need to ensure, but not just them, directorate members of staff as well, because they will be there thinking, is this me? And that's across the whole local authority. So we need to be making sure we have got the support for all of our staff, school staff. And I just want to thank the head teachers for being honest and wanting them to really take home that they do have support as well. And nobody's saying anything other than they're doing a fantastic job and we need to make sure that we're looking after them. So on that, with redundancies, yesterday in COSC I asked a question. I didn't include education in that, but I'm assuming, because I asked if we had enough money in the redundancy pot to cover redundancies, and the deputy leader said that we do have enough money in the pot to make half of BCBC staff redundant should we need to. So I'm assuming we have enough money in the pot to cover any redundancies that are made throughout this, including teaching staff. But on that, when we talked about the financial schemes for schools, when I had my meeting about redundancies, I was told that the local authority will cover any staff redundancies, but they could claw it back within 3 years if you were to potentially reappoint to a teaching position. So I think that's going to be concerning as well, because you'll see Coity, for example, we couldn't make any redundancies because there's a proposed extension within 3 years. There will be other schools who are fluctuating on numbers, particularly comprehensive schools. 1 year you might have an intake of X amount, another year another amount. So they will fluctuate the numbers and the income you've got coming in and the need for teaching staff as well. So it does put schools in a precarious position that they could think that redundancy is covered by the local authority, and yet it could be claimed back if they then appoint within the 3 years. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Williams. Lindsay, would you like to make some general comments on that before we conclude?
I can make some general ones. As far as the finances go, I can't comment on those because, again, I don't have the information. With regards to redundancy, one of the things that we always try to do, and it's almost an implicit memorandum of understanding with schools, if any school is going to make a member of staff redundant and a vacancy opens up elsewhere, head teachers are very good in trying to make sure that we can redeploy. So we'll always do our best. And I think it's fair to say that all heads and all officers, for that matter, who run teams, redundancy is our last option. For a whole host of reasons, we don't want to do that. So we really, really try hard. And I think someone mentioned earlier in this meeting why we've got a lot of coulds in there, because it is a could. What we will try to do first is try to mitigate elsewhere and through additional grants, etc. But the overall comment with regard to availability of funding, I know when schools have made redundancies in the past, what we try to look at is a 3-year fund for payback period, really, because what we don't want to do is obviously staff being made redundant and then schools fill those posts where there's a redundancy payment in place. So we obviously try to do that. The overall pot, I can't comment on, I'm afraid.
Okay, thanks. Deborah, can you add any?
Yeah, I would just repeat what Carrie said yesterday in the corporate overview and scrutiny committee, that we obviously have got funding set aside for redundancies. It's difficult to know how much you're going to need because obviously you've got to go through the whole consultation processes. It can vary for each member of staff depending on how long they've been in post, what length of service they've got, etc. So that can vary, and their age and other factors in that. So yes, we have got provision in place. We obviously, as Lindsay said, in terms of schools, there is obviously a process to go through as well. So we're mindful of that, and obviously we'll be doing our best to mitigate any redundancies, and obviously where we can avoid them, we will, and it'll be a last resort where possible.
Great, thank you for that intervention. Councillor David, some final comments because we have to make some recommendations and conclusions.
Yeah, it is just a quick point. One of the reasons why we've introduced a selective recruitment freeze currently is so that there is greater opportunity, certainly within the council, for redeployment, so that minimises redundancy costs. I think the point's well made about potential redundancy costs. Redundancy costs can vary greatly from no redundancy costs at all if someone's been with us for a very short period to very high redundancy costs. And so that is very individual. We are doing work at the moment on trying to estimate that, but also reduce it wherever possible through a number of different tools like the selective recruitment freeze and recognising that redeployment is certainly an opportunity for some people. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Leader. I'm going to have to draw this to a close, unfortunately, members, because otherwise we won't have any recommendations or conclusions to send back to Cabinet. So perhaps we can pick up anything else at a future date or offline before Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee consider the final recommendations later this month. But I'd like to thank all of our invitees, including both of our head teachers, especially both of our head teachers, for their attendance today and their honest and open contributions, which will inform our discussions going forward. Thank you very much to all invitees, and you may now leave the meeting so that we can summarise our conclusions.
Can I just, before our head teachers leave, because they're going to leave, they might have had some comments in summing up, could I ask that they get forwarded to us so that we get to see their overall thoughts following this meeting, please?
Sorry, can you clarify?
Yeah, because the head teachers now, I think one's already left, that they may have had some closing comments following all of this. We didn't get to it. Could we ask for them in writing to this committee so that we could share them, please? Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Williams. Yes, we'll commit to doing that. I apologise for having such a short time available to discuss our conclusions and recommendations, but we do actually only have 12 minutes before another meeting is due in this chamber, so, and it cannot be moved, unfortunately. We have endeavoured to do that. So I'll hand over to Rachel now to summarise our conclusions and recommendations of a 3.5-hour meeting in the space of 5 minutes. Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to start on the big one, really, in relation to the school budget proposal for 5% cut. And I'm opening it up first to any proposals before I provide any advice. Can I open that to committee, please?
I think the general discussion and following the contributions from the head teachers who are representatives from the School Budget Forum is that a 5% cut would be unsustainable for them to deliver some of the statutory services for our children across both the primary school and secondary school sector. It had been suggested by them during the School Budget Forum sessions on this that potentially a 2% cut and a graduated cut across the course of the midterm financial strategy was more sustainable than a front-loaded cut of 5% and 1% thereafter. I think we ought to take the professionals' view on board when considering recommendations to go back to COSC and then on to Cabinet. So I would put forward a recommendation that Cabinet look at a 2% cut to the education budget, noting that all directorates have to play a role in meeting the balanced and robust budget which the Section 151 officer has to set, and that the reduction in the percentage decrease in budget is found from any postponement of growth budgets in across all directorates, which can be explored by Cabinet in more detail. And that potentially, if teachers' pay and pensions is funded by central government, that a proportion of that is dedicated towards reducing the cut on the education budget. I can see no way of being able to, for our schools to be able to cope with a 5% budget reduction, given what was said by the Corporate Director for Education in that 90% of our schools will enter a deficit position which may be unrecoverable. So that would be my suggestion, but I'm happy to open it out to members. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to propose that we go back with the 2% because whilst they don't want it, it was more palatable and it was more achievable, and it gives them more leeway with regards to the financial schemes for schools requirements and your deficit recovery plan as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Are all members in agreement with that proposal to go back to Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee? Is there, I can't see any dissent. Any dissent? No. So that's been recorded, I think, by Rachel. Over to you again, Rachel. What other items?
Thank you. I'm just going to fly through the potential recommendations, and then if members have any other ones that I haven't picked up that you wish to make, or any other comments, please say. So in the at the beginning of the meeting, there was a request, I think, from Councillor Amanda Williams regarding putting extra pressure on Welsh Government. Can I just clarify that in terms of, did you wish to write to Welsh Government on that and put an extra pressure on for about school budgets? I've got that one noted, and there was a few other extra bits to put in that, which I picked up as well. There was a mention of transformational change, which the Director did actually say they were looking towards anyway. Whether you want to make any recommendation on that, I think it was accepted, to be fair, that it was happening, so it may be obsolete, but if you want to strengthen that, what do you wish to? Yes, no? I could make it as a comment, maybe, in terms of supporting further transformational change.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've also... Oh, yep.
Just on transformational change, I think generally throughout the course of the meeting, it was noted, wasn't it, that some of the ramifications of some of the central budget reduction proposals are going to have a disproportionate impact on schools' delegated budgets. So it's kind of what Councillor Martin Jones said at the very beginning of the meeting, in that it's robbing Peter to pay Paul. And we need to be, I think, a recommendation, I don't know if it's a recommendation, but certainly a comment which needs to go back to Cabinet, in to say that while some of the budget reduction proposals are unpalatable, we need to ensure that it doesn't inflict further pressure on schools which are already under significant pressure by the 5% budget cut which is being proposed. In some regards, I think you mentioned the Education Psychology Service, wasn't it? I think they mentioned the Communication and Relationships team, all sorts of different smaller central teams, which, if they had cuts to them, would add more pressure to schools. So perhaps a general recommendation would be that as a result of that transformative approach, which is necessary, let's ensure that they don't have interconnected ramifications which heap pressure on schools. Councillor Williams, Councillor Spiller.
Yeah, which is why I asked for, if we had departmental structures, we could see then where that might impact on schools as well, where if you lose something that's linked to a school, will schools then have to find that themselves?
Yes, as I said, we can provide structures. It can't be, the pure detail. There can be basic restructures provided to scrutiny committees. It would be a lot for information, to be honest, because in terms of restructures, it would be considering the risks associated with those restructures and the implications, not the actual restructures themselves, obviously. Shall I go on, Chair?
Yeah, please do.
I'll come back to homeschool transport, which was mentioned at the beginning in relation to general, but I've got also, and this is what the other part I said I could include in something to Welsh Government, was regarding receiving early clarification needed on the external central government budget allocation. In terms of then the funding formula, I've got a potential there if members wish to make a recommendation about, but I was thinking more, Councillor Williams, I think this was again towards what you were saying about the funding formula. I was thinking maybe a recommendation that there be further government training on it to make sure the governors are aware how the formula works, what it consists of, etc., to get a greater understanding.
Apologies, I've put my coat on as I know we need to run from this room. Yes, but I got in touch with our clerk and it hasn't come to our primary schools. It goes to comprehensives but not primary. So I think we need to have that information come into primary schools as well. So that needs to be a recommendation that we are sent. But I think they do need to do an internal review, because obviously higher funded schools are going to say we don't want one. So.
Thank you. Councillor Spiller.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a recommendation really from me we heard from the head teachers with regards to the ALM budgets and their views on them, which really are my thoughts as well. And I would like to put a proposal in that those budgets are ring-fenced from further cuts. Because we do have to really obviously look at our legal obligations, but not only that, we have to consider the well-being of those children.
Sorry, Chair, can I just clarify on that? So are you proposing no cuts this year or following these?
No, I'm referring to EDFS 13 and 14,
Yep.
Which were the 9% cuts to ALN provision.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a proposal that those are protected areas of the budget.
So that they don't get cut?
No.
Right, and the only thing I will say is that the proposal then is, where does that come from then in terms of those? Do you want to link it in with the other recommendation that was made at the beginning regarding look at the potential growth?
Well, I think we identified an area which was a nice to have rather than a need to have. And I believe that was yourself, Councillor Williams, that came up with that. So that there is, definite scope for looking at where the provision already exists, but we're strengthening it rather than taking an area where head teachers are saying we should not be making cuts in that area.
So just to review that, I mentioned that there was strengthening statutory duties, wasn't it, in the budget pressures relating to early help and edge of care and safeguarding accountabilities. That was to the tune of £500,000. Councillor Spiller's comments are relating to £67,000, so potentially there could be some scope for movement there.
That does actually link in though with what you were saying. That does contradict slightly what you were saying regarding the early help, because that proposal is that increase, I think, the growth that they were talking about with for early care.
Right.
Just to be devil's advocate.
Let's just point out that was a £500,000 increase. The leader said 362. So in my mind, 67 plus 362 doesn't amount to 500. So there's some scope.
Perhaps we can have some clarity on that. And also, it's difficult for each individual committee to come up with recommendations and then to look holistically at the organisation and provide where the funding's coming from. So I think that may be a job for COSC to do at the end, once they've received all of the recommendations. But perhaps that can be recorded and we can pick it up again. And building on that is that, building on what Councillor Spiller says about statutory services and potential uplifts in discretionary funding, there are a number of cases within this budget reduction proposal list which mention the potential of not being able to deliver our statutory obligations. We must guard against that, because there will be significant ramifications for the local authority if it can't exercise its statutory duties. So I think we need to write back to Cabinet in saying, well, anything which puts our delivery of statutory services at risk ought to be looked at again. Apart from that, Rachel, is there anything else which you've captured?
The only other one was homeschool transport. Was there anything members wish to make on the homeschool transport? The only thing I will say I've definitely noted is I can imagine this is going to come up in your forward work programme over the next 12 months. So I've noted down that one of the focuses there is to look at how many children are receiving homeschool transport, for example, relating to the unsafe routes to school that Councillor Amanda Williams raised. So,
and just to add that the impact upon Welsh medium language education, that has been referred to by colleagues, and of course nursery provision as well. But as you say, now that the corporate director is committed to looking at the uplift in home to school transport provision beyond the statutory minimum before the guidance is forthcoming from Welsh Government, that will inevitably come before our committee for discussion while it's out for consultation. So that's excellent. That was a rapid run through, Rachel. Thank you very much for summarising that 3.5-hour discussion in the space of 5 minutes. Spot on, Rachel, as always. We now move to item 6, and that's urgent items. There are no urgent items of business in respect of which notice has been given in accordance with Part 4, Paragraph 4 of the Council Procedure Rules. I'd like to thank all members for their contributions and our invitees. Thank you to observers from colleagues and members of the public, and I declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much.